My dear friends, welcome to the channel. Billy Graham, nice speech. God sees what you've lost, and he cares deeply. You may feel forgotten, overlooked, or like the years have passed without justice, but God never misses a single tear. He has seen every loss, every setback, every door that closed unfairly. What was stolen, delayed, or denied is not the end of your story. The God who numbers the hairs on your head also keeps record of your pain, and he is not passive about it. 2. Delay is not denial. Restoration takes time, but it's coming. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. God often works in the waiting, building character, preparing blessing, and orchestrating the right time. What looks like a delay is often divine preparation. Don't misinterpret God's silence as absence. His timing is always perfect, and restoration is already in motion behind the scenes. 3. God specializes in giving back more than what was lost. When God restores, he doesn't just return what you had, he multiplies it. Think of Job, who lost everything, but God gave him back double. Think of Joseph, who was sold into slavery, but ended up ruling Egypt. God doesn't just make it even, he makes it better. What you lost might not come back the same way, but it will come back stronger, fuller, and more aligned with your purpose. 4. You're not too late, too old, or too far gone for God's restoration. The enemy wants you to believe your moment has passed, that you missed your window or made too many mistakes. But God is not limited by human timelines. He restores wasted years, broken dreams, missed opportunities, and even relationships that seemed dead. It's not over. God is just getting started with you. 5. Your faith is the bridge between loss and restoration. Worry shuts the door to peace, but faith opens the window for miracles. Even in the valley, trust that God is working. Speak life even when you see death. Stand on God's promises even when your emotions say otherwise. Faith isn't pretending, it's believing that the God who promised restoration is faithful to perform it. 6. This is your season of recovery. Get ready for the comeback. You've cried, you've waited, you've endured storms, but now the shift is happening. God is aligning resources, people, and opportunities to restore you. Doors are going to open. Favor is going to follow you. What was taken will be returned. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Don't worry. Your restoration is closer than you think. You may think God isn't paying attention to what you've lost. You may look back on seasons of heartbreak, missed chances, financial collapse, family breakdowns, and quietly wonder if heaven noticed. But let me tell you this, God sees, God knows, and God cares deeply. Every moment you cried in silence, every time you held your breath hoping for a break through that never came, every opportunity that passed you by while you were doing your best to be faithful, none of it was wasted, and none of it was missed by him. We often try to rationalize loss. We tell ourselves it's just life, or maybe I didn't deserve it, or worse, maybe God's punishing me. But that's not the truth. The truth is that we live in a broken world where injustice happens, where evil sometimes wins the battle but never the war, and where even good people suffer without reason. But the greater truth, the one that steadies us, is that God is not indifferent to your pain. He keeps score, not to condemn you, but to redeem you. This is not some abstract theological point. It's a psychological anchor. When a person believes that their suffering has no meaning, hopelessness follows. But if you believe, truly believe, that a sovereign and loving God has witnessed your pain and plans to do something about it, then despair turns into expectation. That shift changes how you walk through life. You stop dragging your feet and start lifting your eyes, because you know something is coming. Even in Scripture, we find over and over again that God shows himself most vividly to those who have lost the most. The woman at the well, shunned, broken, passed around like property, was the first person Jesus plainly revealed himself to as the Messiah. Not a king, not a priest, but a woman with a record and a story. Why? Because God sees the unseen. He notices the ones the world has written off, and that includes you. Philosophers talk about the concept of divine justice as a future hope. But biblical restoration is more than a philosophical promise. It's a living, active movement of God toward those who have been hurt. When God restores, it's personal. He doesn't just replace what was lost. He revives the soul that was crushed by the loss. So if you're wondering whether God noticed that betrayal, that divorce, that miscarriage, that business deal that stole your savings, yes, he saw it all. He saw what they did. He saw what life took, and he is not done with your story. The first step to receiving restoration is believing that the restorer is aware. Not only aware, but moved. Not only moved, but preparing. Here's what I want you to take with you today. Just because others overlooked your loss doesn't mean God did. He's not just aware of your pain. He's already preparing your comeback. Don't let the silence fool you. He's watching, and when we face delay, it's easy to assume denial. Our human minds are wired for immediacy. We live in a culture of speed, instant answers, same-day deliveries, real-time updates. So when God doesn't respond right away, we start to doubt. We think maybe he changed his mind. Maybe we missed our moment. Maybe what we hoped for just isn't meant to be. But let me tell you, delay does not mean denial. In God's economy, waiting is never wasted, it's preparation. There's a difference between something being ready for you and you being ready for it. And often, while we're praying for restoration, God is reshaping us to handle it. He's strengthening our character, refining our faith, and teaching us how to steward the blessing when it comes. Because if we receive too soon what we're not yet mature enough to carry, it won't restore us, it'll crush us. Think of the farmer. He plants the seed, then waits. Not because the seed is denied its destiny, but because the soil must nurture it, time must pass, and unseen processes must take place underground. The farmer doesn't dig up the seed every day to check its progress. He trusts the process. That's how God works. He's planted something in your life. He's spoken promises over you. And even if it looks like nothing is happening, beneath the surface, everything is happening. Philosophers and psychologists alike agree that endurance builds depth. Waiting challenges the ego. It quiets the part of us that wants to control outcomes. It stretches our emotional resilience. And spiritually, it creates space for trust. We learn to rely not on outcomes, but on the one who controls the outcomes, and that shift is where peace begins. Consider Joseph in the Old Testament, sold by his brothers, wrongly imprisoned, forgotten by men, but never forgotten by God. The delay wasn't punishment, it was placement. In time, God positioned him to preserve a nation, but that didn't happen overnight. It took 13 long years. Why? Because the calling on his life required a deeper foundation than comfort could build. The same is true for you. You may not understand the delay, but that doesn't mean it's without meaning. What feels like a pause may be divine timing aligning things you cannot see. God might be working on someone else's heart. He might be building a network, orchestrating a moment, or even protecting you from something you thought you needed. What looks like a not yet is often a not like this. And here's the truth. When the restoration comes, it will make sense. You'll look back and thank him for not giving it to you when you begged for it, because you'll see how the wait shaped you into someone stronger, wiser, and more prepared. So don't give up in the waiting. Don't let impatience rob you of the miracle. Just because it hasn't come yet doesn't mean it's not coming. God's delays are not denials. They are setups for something greater than you imagined. Let your faith outlast the wait. One of the greatest misunderstandings about God's restoration is that He simply gives back what was taken, that He just resets the clock, puts things back to how they were, and leaves it at that. But that's not how God works. When God restores, He multiplies. He doesn't just return what you lost. He adds value to it, power to it, and purpose through it. What comes back is not just familiar, it's transformed. That's why when you look at the pattern of restoration in Scripture, it's never about simply replacing what was lost. It's about surpassing it. Job didn't just get his old life back, he received double. Ruth didn't just get food for the day, she was grafted into the lineage of the Messiah. The prodigal son wasn't just welcomed home. He was restored with honor, robes, a ring, and a feast. Because when God restores, He doesn't just rewind, He redeems. Why does He do that? Because the loss itself wasn't meaningless. It did something in you. It deepened your soul. It sharpened your discernment. It made you more compassionate, more humble, more dependent on Him. In God's hands, the loss becomes a tool. Not just something to mourn, but something He uses to shape your future. So when restoration comes, it's not a return to who you were. It's a revelation of who you've become. Now think about that on a psychological level. Human beings need meaning to endure pain. When people experience tragedy without any framework for understanding it, it leads to despair, anxiety, and often bitterness. But when you believe that your suffering has purpose, when you see that God uses your losses as the soil for your growth, hope rises. You begin to expect goodness not just as a possibility, but as a promise. This is why restoration in God's hands is never transactional. It's transformational. He doesn't just give you the job you lost. He gives you a better opportunity with clearer vision and stronger faith. He doesn't just mend a broken relationship. He gives you deeper capacity to love and forgive. He doesn't just replace years that were wasted. He gives you wisdom to redeem the time going forward. What you receive in return is not just equal, it's elevated. That's the beauty of divine restoration. It leaves you better than it found you, but to receive it, you must shift your expectation. Stop looking for things to go back to how they were. God's not trying to reset your past. He's trying to fulfill your future. What you lost may have been precious, but what God is bringing will carry glory. So I urge you, stop mourning the version of your life that ended. Start preparing for the version God is about to reveal. The comeback won't be a copy, it'll be a new creation, and when it arrives, you'll know it was worth every tear, every detour, and every long night. One of the most dangerous lies you can believe is this: it's too late for me. That somehow you've missed your moment, that you've fallen too far, waited too long, messed up too badly, that what's been lost cannot be found. But I want to tell you as plainly and truthfully as I can, you are not too late, too old, or too far gone for God to restore you. It's easy to look around and think everyone else is ahead. The world celebrates early success, young talent, fast results, but God isn't operating on a clock that was set by society. He isn't measuring your potential based on your age or your mistakes. God works in divine timing, not human scheduling, and when He moves, He doesn't consult your resume or your regrets. He responds to your readiness. There's something deeply human about the fear that our best days are behind us. It's tied to our longing for purpose, for redemption, for a second chance. And when we think we've run out of time, we often settle into passivity. We stop trying, stop hoping, stop believing. That's exactly where the enemy wants you, silent, stagnant, stuck in shame. But that's not where God leaves you. Look at Moses. He was 80 years old when God called him to lead a nation out of slavery. Look at Sarah. She laughed at the idea of bearing a child in old age, but God made her a mother of nations. And look at Peter. After denying Jesus 3 times, thinking he'd ruined everything, he was still chosen to preach the first sermon of the early church. God does not disqualify you based on your past. He rewrites your story to include your comeback. Even in psychology, we know that people flourish when they are given renewed purpose, especially after trauma, after failure, after seasons of loss. It reactivates the brain, it reawakens the soul. Hope becomes not just an emotion, but a force. Restoration isn't just about recovering what was lost, it's about recovering who you are. Sometimes we define ourselves by the lowest point we've lived through. We wear the label divorced, bankrupt, broken, abandoned, too late. But God calls you something else. Redeemed, chosen, beloved, restored. And when He restores, He doesn't consult the clock. He speaks into the now. He says, I will restore the years the locusts have eaten. And not just the things, but the time. That's the kind of restoration only God can do. So don't disqualify yourself from what God has already prepared. Don't assume that because the opportunity passed, the blessing did too. God doesn't need to recreate the old path. He's creating a new one. Your past doesn't cancel your promise. It may actually be the platform for it. You haven't missed it. God hasn't finished it. If you still have breath, you still have purpose. Restoration isn't behind you, it's ahead of you. Keep walking. God is not done restoring backslash. There's a connection between faith and restoration that cannot be overstated. Faith is not just a feeling or a spiritual buzzword. It is the bridge between where you are and what God has promised. Without it, even the most beautiful promise can feel distant, unreachable, but with it, everything changes. Faith doesn't erase the loss, but it reframes it. It reminds you that what was taken doesn't have the final word. God does. Worry, on the other hand, is a thief. It steals peace, weakens hope, and locks your eyes on the problem rather than the solution. And while it's a natural human response to uncertainty, worry is also deeply rooted in fear. Fear that God won't come through, fear that you'll be disappointed again, fear that maybe what you hoped for is gone forever. But worry is not where restoration begins. Restoration begins when faith steps in. Faith is not the denial of reality. It's the decision to believe that reality isn't finished being written. It's the choice to say, yes, I see the damage. Yes, I feel the pain. But I also believe God is greater than what I see. And when you live from that place, your perspective shifts. You start speaking differently. You begin to act not like a victim of your past, but as someone expecting breakthrough in your future. Psychologically, this shift is transformative. The human brain responds to belief. When we anticipate positive change, especially when rooted in a higher purpose, it activates hope, motivation, and resilience. You begin to notice doors you wouldn't have seen in despair. You respond to setbacks with tenacity instead of defeat. In short, belief opens the heart to possibility, and that posture creates space for God to move. That's why Jesus was so consistent in saying, your faith has made you whole, not your perfection, not your qualifications. Your faith, because faith is the key that unlocks restoration. Not because faith manipulates God, but because it positions you to receive what He already intends to give. Even when your circumstances seem unchanged, faith reminds you that the story is still unfolding. It anchors you when emotions pull at you. It steadies you when the past screams louder than the promise, and it keeps your eyes on the restorer, not the ruin. Some of you are watching your life and thinking, I don't see any signs of restoration. But just because you don't see it yet doesn't mean God isn't working. He often works in silence. Faith says, even in the silence, I trust you. And that trust becomes your foundation. So let me ask you, what are you feeding more, your fear or your faith? Because one leads to paralysis, the other to movement. One closes the door, the other opens it. There's a moment when everything begins to shift, not because your circumstances have changed, but because you have. You've walked through pain, you've waited in faith, and you've held on through delay and silence. But now, something deep inside you begins to stir, a quiet confidence that the season is turning, that you're not just surviving anymore, you're on the edge of recovery. And not just recovery, but divine restoration. This is your season of comeback. God never brings you through something just to leave you there. He is a God of patterns and principles, and one of those principles is restoration after suffering. Scripture says, after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. That's not a vague encouragement, that's a divine pattern. Suffering, then strengthening, loss, then lifting, delay, then deliverance, and here's what many people miss. Restoration doesn't always knock. It often walks in quietly, disguised as new opportunities, unexpected favor, or a fresh perspective that changes everything. The question isn't whether God will restore, it's whether you're prepared to receive what He's bringing. That's why you can't stay in a mindset of loss while stepping into a season of recovery. You've got to shift. You've got to expect again. You've got to start walking like someone whose redemption is not just possible, but imminent. Psychologically, readiness matters. We know from research in trauma recovery and post-crisis growth that people who anticipate healing often experience it sooner. Why? Because readiness reactivates hope. It creates space for forward movement. It allows people to see possibilities where they once saw only pain, and spiritually, the same truth holds. Restoration flows where faith has prepared room for it. You may not feel ready. You may still feel bruised by the battle, worn out from the waiting, but readiness isn't a feeling, it's a decision. It's saying, I won't let what I've lost define what God can still do. It's choosing to open your heart, to take the next step, even if you don't see the full picture yet. And you don't need to see the full picture. You just need to take the next faithful step. That could be a prayer, a phone call, a decision to forgive, a decision to believe again. These are the small acts of faith that open the door for something bigger than you imagined, because restoration doesn't begin with a thunderclap. It often begins with a whisper, a nudge, a step. God is aligning things for your good even now. People you haven't met yet, resources you didn't know were coming, favor that's been stored up for such a time as this. It's not just about what you lost, it's about what you're about to gain. So don't sit in the ashes of what was, stand in expectation of what's coming, because you're not just getting back on your feet, you're rising into something greater. This is your season of recovery. Get ready. Your comeback is closer than you think.